Sarah Collins was just a quiet girl with a sketchbook until the bullying that no one saw pushed her to the edge of despair. Behind her shy smile hid a nightmare of threats, secrets, and a darkness that would shock an entire town. This is the story of how invisible cruelty became deadly and why Sarah's fight still matters. Sarah Collins was the kind of girl who blended easily into the background. At 15, she was quiet, thoughtful, and spent most of her time drawing in her sketchbook. Her small town was the kind where everyone knew each other, and the rhythms of daily life moved slowly and predictably. But beneath this peaceful surface, Sarah's world was beginning to unravel in ways no one could see. At school, Sarah kept to herself. She wasn't part of any particular group or crowd, preferring to stay on the edges rather than in the center of attention. Her clothes were simple, and she rarely spoke unless spoken to. For many students, she was almost invisible, a shadow in the hallways. But invisibility sometimes comes with a price. It made her an easy target for those who enjoyed wielding power over others. The first incidents were small, almost unnoticeable. A whispered insult as she passed by, a quick laugh shared behind her back, a nickname that stung but wasn't quite loud enough for teachers to hear. Sarah tried to ignore it, telling herself it wasn't worth the trouble. She believed that if she just kept quiet and stayed out of sight, the teasing would eventually stop. But it didn't. The whispers turned into louder jeers. Her classmates began making fun of her clothes, mocking the way she spoke, and pointing out her awkwardness. At times, she found herself shoved in the crowded corridors or tripped on the stairs. It wasn't constant, but it was enough to make her dread every school day. The laughter felt like it was always just behind her, waiting to pounce. At home, Sarah's parents noticed a change. The bright girl who once loved to share her drawings with them became withdrawn and silent. She stopped talking about her day and spent most evenings alone in her room. Her mother tried to reach out, but Sarah's answers were brief and distant. There was no sign of bruises or injuries, just an unspoken sadness that filled the space between them. One afternoon, after school, Sarah sat on the edge of the park bench near her house. She pulled out her sketchbook and began to draw, hoping to lose herself in the familiar lines and shapes. But even there, she felt the weight of eyes watching her, imaginary or real, she couldn't tell. The idea of telling someone about the bullying never crossed her mind. She was afraid of making things worse or being seen as weak. In school, a few teachers noticed Sarah's decline. Her grades slipped, and she often seemed distracted in class. Yet, no one knew what to do. The school's anti-bullying policies were there in theory, but the invisible nature of Sarah's torment made it difficult to intervene. Without clear evidence or a confession, the bullying was dismissed as typical teenage behavior. Meanwhile, Sarah's bullies grew bolder. They started following her on social media, sending messages that were cruel and relentless. At first, Sarah didn't respond, hoping it would stop. But the insults and threats only increased. It was no longer just a problem at school. It was everywhere she went. The quiet girl who once escaped into her art was trapped in a world that felt increasingly hostile. The community around her remained unaware of the storm gathering just beneath the surface. No one could imagine how dark and deep the shadows of bullying would grow, and how far they would push Sarah Collins before it was too late. The bullying Sarah faced grew worse as the weeks passed, turning from cruel jokes into something darker and more dangerous. The small acts of teasing at school became loud taunts that echoed through the hallways. Groups of students would gather near her locker, whispering threats and laughing at her expense. Sometimes, when no one was watching, Sarah would be shoved into walls, or tripped as she walked through the crowded corridors. The fear of these attacks began to take over her every moment at school. She started to avoid places where the bullying was worst. The cafeteria, once a place where she hoped to sit quietly and eat, now felt like a trap. The hallways were full of eyes and voices waiting to torment her. Sarah's steps became slower, her head lowered to avoid any attention. Teachers noticed she was quieter than before, but the bullying was often subtle or happened when adults weren't around, making it difficult to catch. At home, the changes were even more noticeable. Sarah's parents watched as their daughter retreated into herself. She stopped talking about her day and became withdrawn. The sparkle in her eyes faded. She spent hours alone in her room, headphones on, trying to block out the world. Her drawings, once full of vibrant colours and imagination, became darker and filled with shadows. Despite their worries, her parents didn't know the full story. Sarah never told them about the bullying. She didn't want to worry them or risk making things worse. Teachers tried to help, but the problem was complicated. Sarah's bullies denied everything when questioned, and without proof, it was their word against hers. The school's anti-bullying policies felt powerless in the face of constant rumours and hidden cruelty. Some teachers thought Sarah was just shy or struggling with typical teenage issues, unaware of the depth of her suffering. The bullying wasn't limited to school anymore. Sarah's tormentors followed her online, where they created fake profiles to send her threatening messages. The internet, which should have been a place for connection and creativity, turned into a battlefield. Sarah's phone buzzed constantly with hateful comments and cruel jokes meant to humiliate her. Each notification sent a fresh wave of fear and sadness crashing over her. One day, Sarah found a message that went beyond name-calling. It was a direct threat, promising worse things if she spoke out. The message made her heart race and her hands shake. She showed it to the school counselor, hoping for help. The counselor was shocked and immediately wanted to take action. But the bully was careful, covering their tracks well. Without knowing exactly who sent the messages, the school struggled to protect Sarah. The threat weighed heavily on Sarah. She began to dread every moment, both at school and at home. The bullying felt like a noose tightening around her, and the silence of those who might have helped made her feel utterly alone. Friends she thought she could trust drifted away, afraid of becoming targets themselves. The isolation grew deeper, the pain more unbearable. Yet, beneath the surface, Sarah still held onto a tiny hope. That one day, the bullying would stop, that someone would see her pain and step in. But as the days went on, the darkness around her only grew thicker, and the battle to survive became harder with every passing moment. The bullying that Sarah endured had already crossed from cruel words and physical intimidation into something far more invasive: the digital world. At first, the online messages were just another way for her tormentors to reach her, but soon they became relentless and terrifying. Anonymous accounts sent threats, insults, and disturbing images that left Sarah feeling exposed and vulnerable no matter where she was. There was no escape, even at home. The school counselor was the first adult outside of Sarah's family to truly grasp the severity of the situation. One afternoon, Sarah hesitantly handed over her phone, showing the counselor the barrage of messages she had been receiving. The counselor's face grew serious as they scrolled through hateful words, crude pictures, and warnings that felt more like promises. Some messages were cryptic, others shockingly direct, but all carried the same dangerous weight. The counselor wanted to act quickly. They reported the abuse to the school administration and suggested increasing security around Sarah's day-to-day routine. However, Digital bullying was difficult to stop. The anonymous nature of the threats made it almost impossible to identify the sender. The bullies used fake accounts, switching names and deleting messages before anyone could trace them. Efforts were made to monitor the school's online spaces, but the cyber attacks continued. The anonymity made the bullies bolder, and they began involving other students, turning online harassment into a campaign that spread throughout the entire student body. Rumors and lies were circulated on social media, and groups formed that targeted Sarah in new and unexpected ways. Despite all the evidence, the school struggled to take strong action. Some administrators feared that punishing students without clear proof could lead to backlash or even legal complications. Others believed that bullying was just a part of growing up, something students had to learn to handle on their own. This failure to act decisively left Sarah increasingly unprotected. At home, Sarah's family sensed the growing danger but didn't fully understand its extent. Her parents noticed her phone's constant buzzing and saw her anxiety deepen every time she looked at it. They urged her to speak up, but Sarah was trapped by fear, afraid that telling the full truth would only make things worse, or that no one would believe her. As the bullying grew more intense, Sarah's mental state deteriorated. The constant threats wore her down, eroding her sense of safety and hope. She began withdrawing even more, shutting out friends and family. Her art, once a refuge, now reflected her pain. Dark sketches filled with twisted shapes and broken figures. It was a silent scream for help that few noticed. Behind the scenes, a shadowy figure pulled strings, using online identities to manipulate not only Sarah, but others at the school. This person created fake profiles that spread lies and stoked fears, turning classmates against each other. The bullying was no longer random cruelty. It was a calculated game of control and destruction. When the police were finally brought into the investigation, the digital evidence painted a complicated picture. Tracing the origin of messages and fake accounts required time and expertise. Every lead seemed to open new questions. Who was behind the masks? Why target Sarah so viciously? And how deep did this web of deception go? The answers remained elusive, leaving Sarah trapped in a growing nightmare. Each message she received was a reminder that someone was watching, waiting, and willing to push her further into the darkness. The once quiet girl was now at the center of a storm that threatened to consume her completely. The day Sarah was found lifeless in her bedroom sent shockwaves through the town. At first, it seemed like a tragic suicide, an unbearable end to a young life crushed by relentless bullying. The community mourned deeply, struggling to understand how a quiet, artistic girl could reach such a desperate point. Flowers and candles appeared outside her house, and classmates grappled with guilt, wondering if they could have done more. Police arrived quickly to investigate, treating the scene with the care reserved for cases that demanded answers. The initial reports described no signs of forced entry or struggle, and the note left behind suggested Sarah had felt overwhelmed by her pain. But as detectives looked closer, some details didn't quite fit. Certain messages on Sarah's phone hinted at something more complex than simple bullying. There were references to a person or persons lurking behind the cruelty, a hidden force amplifying the torment. The police dug deeper into Sarah's social media accounts and phone records. They discovered multiple anonymous profiles sending threatening messages, but identifying the creator was proving difficult. The online threats had been carefully crafted to sow fear without revealing any clue to the sender's true identity. The investigators realized this was more than random cruelty. It was a calculated campaign. Interviews with Sarah's classmates revealed a tangled web of relationships and rivalries beneath the school's surface. Some students had seen strange interactions, but were afraid to speak openly. The fear of retaliation kept many silent, and others dismissed the bullying as typical teenage drama. However, behind the scenes, a small group seemed to be orchestrating the harassment with precision. A breakthrough came when a tech expert assisting the police managed to trace some of the threatening messages to a specific IP address. This led them to a student who appeared outwardly kind and popular, a person no one suspected. The discovery shocked the school community, casting doubt on everything they thought they knew about their peers. Further investigation uncovered that this student had been using multiple fake accounts to manipulate others, spreading false rumors and inciting fear. This person's motives were complex, part jealousy, part a desire for control over the social order at school. The student had hidden behind a digital mask, using anonymity to push Sarah and others into isolation and despair. Revelation stunned Sarah's family, friends, and teachers. The idea that someone so close could be responsible for such cruelty added a new layer of pain to their grief. It also raised uncomfortable questions about how deeply bullying could be embedded in the school's culture without being addressed. As the investigation unfolded, the community grappled with the harsh truth that bullying was not always straightforward. It could be fueled by hidden agendas and dark manipulation. Sarah's death was a tragic consequence of this hidden cruelty, an innocent caught in a dangerous game far beyond her control. The town vowed to do better, to listen more closely, and to act swiftly against bullying in all its forms. But the scars Sarah left behind would not heal easily. Her story became a haunting reminder that sometimes the monsters hiding in plain sight are the hardest to see and the most deadly of all. The discovery of the true instigator behind the bullying sent shockwaves through the entire school community. No one had suspected the quiet, well-liked student who had always seemed to stand against cruelty. Yet behind that friendly face was a web of deception and manipulation far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. This student had created multiple fake online profiles to torment Sarah and others, using carefully crafted messages to stir fear and confusion. The investigation revealed a tangled story of jealousy and control. The student, driven by feelings of resentment and a desire for power, had used bullying as a tool to assert dominance over peers. By hiding behind anonymous accounts, they escaped suspicion and punishment, allowing the harassment to grow unchecked. The damage done to Sarah was just one part of a larger pattern that had been going on for months, maybe even years. As authorities pieced together the truth, the depth of the deception became clear. The fake accounts were part of a larger network, designed to manipulate social dynamics within the school. Rumors were spread, friendships destroyed, and fears amplified, all orchestrated by someone who seemed trustworthy on the surface. This calculated cruelty was harder to detect and even harder to stop. The students' motivations were complicated. Some believed it was a twisted attempt to fit in by controlling others, while others thought it was a dark response to their own hidden struggles. Regardless of the reasons, the consequences were devastating. Sarah's death was the tragic result of this hidden cruelty, a stark reminder of how bullying can become a deadly weapon when mixed with manipulation and secrecy. The school faced intense scrutiny. Parents, teachers, and officials questioned how such behavior had gone unnoticed for so long. Policies were reviewed and changed, focusing on better detection of cyberbullying and stronger support systems for victims. Training programs for staff and students were introduced, aiming to create a culture where silence and fear had no place. Sarah's family, while grieving, became vocal advocates for anti-bullying efforts. They shared her story to raise awareness, about the dangers of bullying and the importance of speaking up. Their message was clear. No one should suffer in silence, and communities must act swiftly to protect their most vulnerable. The revelation also sparked important conversations about mental health and the pressures faced by teenagers today. It became evident that bullying often masks deeper issues, and addressing these requires compassion, understanding, and vigilance from everyone involved. In the aftermath, friendships were rebuilt, and the school community slowly began healing. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of what had been lost and what must never be allowed to happen again. Sarah's story left a lasting impact, pushing the town to confront uncomfortable truths and strive for a safer, kinder environment. Bullied to death, Sarah's life was cut tragically short by a cruelty hidden behind masks and screens. Her story exposed the dangerous complexities of bullying and the urgent need for awareness, empathy, and action. Though she is gone, the lessons she left behind continue to echo, challenging us all to see beyond appearances and protect those who cannot protect themselves.